Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to the Goddesses of Death podcast. Say hi, Beppy.
Hello.
So tonight we're going over the Green River Killer, better known as Gary Ridgway. So a murder spree that started in 1982 and went well into 1984 and even beyond that, depending on if you believe his confessions or not to certain murders, gripped his entire, the entire state of Washington. So Gary Ridgway was born on February 18th, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. He was the second son of three to Mary and Thomas Ridgway. Home life was somewhat troubled. Relatives have described his mother as domineering and have said that while young, he witnessed more than one violent argument between his parents. His father was a bus driver who would often complain about his presence, would often complain about the presence of sex workers. So already he was instilled with a hatred for what were known commonly as fallen women or dirty women, women of the night. Born on February 18th, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah, Gary Ridgway had a seemingly happy and normal childhood. But then at age 15, he stabbed a young boy just to see how stabbing worked. Ridgway later told a psychologist that he was interested in stabbing because he was struggling with being sexually attracted to his own mother and wanted to kill her because of it. He also confessed that he had a bedwetting problem into his early teens that had cleared recollections of his mother washing his genitals after he wet the bed. Some experts think that this may have been a part of a larger pattern of inappropriate behavior on the part of Ridgway's mother. And while she was ultimately spared from Ridgway's killing spree, some believe that his crimes may have amounted to a case of displaced matricide and that he was unconsciously killing his mother over and over again. But for a long time, Ridgway put up a front, a very good front, actually. His IQ was very much recorded in what is known as the low 80s. Speaking of the 6-year-old boy, Ridgway was diagnosed with dyslexia, which led to him being held back a year in high school. At the age of 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy who survived the attack. Ridgway led the young boy into the woods and then stabbed him through the ribs into his liver. Ridgway eventually did graduate from Thai High School in 1969 and married his first wife, his then 19-year-old girlfriend, Claudia Crane. While with her, he went on to join the United States Navy and was sent to Vietnam. While there, he served on board a supply ship and saw combat. During his time in the military, Ridgway had frequented sexual encounters with sex workers and had contracted gonorrhea. The gonorrhea led to a lot, including his divorce to his first wife, because even though him getting the disease had quote-unquote angered him, he continued the behavior with no protection. And then they were divorced a year later. However, I do actually have an interview from her. If I can find the right tab. I'm trying to find the right tab. I don't know if I lost it or not. I think I might have. Damn it. I hate when I lose shit. Sorry, guys. I thought I had my shit together. I do not. So Give me just a slight moment to find some stuff. Any thoughts and opinions on this killer you want to share, babe?
Definitely was a very, very sick individual. For sure. He was very interesting in, like, his thought process on it. And one of like it says in the photo, one of America's second most prolific serial killers, which is insane because, like, you hear a lot about, like, the Zodiac Killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, but, like, not a lot of people know about the Green River Killer, despite how many victims he had.
Which also, like, yeah, it's actually very, like, I think it's because Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy got a lot of media coverage. Whereas the Green River Killer was mainly stuck to a single task force in the town of Walla Walla, Washington.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think it also had to do with most of his victims, if I remember correctly, were prostitutes and young underage runaways. So his victims. So here is a quick overview of his victims. We'll read out the whole list later, but before the confessions, because Gary Ridgway did confess to 49 confirmed murders. Authorities had attributed the 49 murders to the Green River Killer anyway. Ridgway confessed to murdering 71 victims. Ridgway's victims were not women of any specific race or ethnicity, but rather they were all women between the ages of 14 and 26, except for 3 of them. Mm-hmm. The majority were prostitutes and runaways. There actually goes into that, like, so going back into his past before the murder started to occur. Family and friends have described Ridgway as friendly but strange. His first 2 marriages resulted in divorce because of infidelities of both partners. According to Marcy Wilslow, who was his second wife, he had placed her in a chokehold, and he was said to have become religious during his second marriage. He would proselytize door to door, read the Bible aloud at work and at home, and insisting his wife follow the strict teachings of their pastor. He was also known to cry after sermons or reading the Bible. Despite this, Ridgway continued to solicit prostitutes and wanted his wife to participate in sexual activities in public and inappropriate places. And actually, the places he was suggesting that they have sex were later places that bodies were found. So he already had a connection to these places. According to the women in Ridgway's life, they describe him as having an insatiable sexual appetite. His ex-wives and several ex-girlfriends reported that he demanded sex from them several times a day. He would often ask to have public sex in the woods, and Ridgway himself admitted to having a fixation with sex workers, with whom he had a love-hate relationship with. He frequently complained about their presence in his neighborhood, but he also took advantage of their services regularly. Some have speculated that Ridgway was torn between his lust and his staunch religious beliefs. He also does have one child. We will not be releasing the child's name, but he does have one child. I'm trying to find where I put... Okay. That's not the confession. Yeah, he did have... They found that they came from many different states, and you're right, at least 4 states.
So this is actually part of Ridgway's confession. This was a confession that he gave in after being arrested for his plea bargain, and this will continue to be updated. But as we go through his crimes, I kind of want to read the confession part. I killed the 48 women listed in the state's second amended information. In most cases, when I murdered these women, I did not know their names. Most of the time, I killed them the first time I met them, and I do not have a good memory for their faces. I killed so many women, I have a hard time keeping them straight. Ridgway also later confessed to the thought that the strangulation because he mostly strangled these women to death after having sex with them. He called it his job. He called it his calling. It was something that he seemed almost proud of, which is a little gross. But so the murders didn't start happening until after the divorce from the second wife. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, Ridgway is believed to have murdered at least 71 teenage girls and women near Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. In court statements, Ridgway later reported that he had killed so many that he lost count. The majority of the murders occurred between 1982 and 1984. The victims were believed to either be sex workers or runaways, whom he picked up along specific highways south. Ridgway sometimes showed the women a picture of his son in order to trick them into trusting him. They would engage in sexual activity, and after minutes of intercourse from behind, Ridgway would wrap his forearm around the front of their neck and use the other arm to pull back as tightly as he could, strangling them. He killed most of his victims at home or in his truck or a secluded area. Most of the bodies were dumped in the wooded area around Green River, Seattle, Tacoma International Airport, and other dump sites within South King County. There were also 2 confirmed and 2 suspected victims found in Portland, Oregon. So, where am I going? I do want to kind of read this out because it is an interview with Ridgway's son. Young Ridgway remembers his father as a relaxed man who never yelled and who took him camping, taught him to play baseball, and always showed up for school concerts and soccer practices. Even when I was in 4th grade, when I was with soccer, he always, be there for me. Ridgway, now 28, told investigators on December 1st, 2001, the day after his father's arrest for the 4 murders. I don't think I ever remembered him not being there, he said. During the years when Gary Ridgway was taking his son on bike rides and to eat donuts, he was also terrorizing the South Sound by killing women and dumping their bodies in deserted areas. In fact, Ridgway's son, born in September 1975, played an unwitting part in the Federal Way area truck painter's rampage. Gary Ridgway told investigators this summer he sometimes showed his son's picture or the boys' room at his home to women to put them at ease. In July 1982, Ridgway picked up a woman with her son in the car, killed her in a nearby woods, and then told the boy the woman had decided to walk home. Another time, he had sex with the dead body of one of his victims while his son slept in the truck about 30 feet away. So his son was present for this. That's gross.
Yeah.
That's... What the fuck is happening with life? Do you want to look up the first body found with Gary Ridgway? Ridgway did later explain that he did not find necrophilia more sexually satisfying. So Ridgway would kill these women, abduct them, have sex with them, kill them, and then leave their bodies in clusters in very specific areas, sometimes posed and usually nude. He would reportedly return to the bodies in the dump sites to have intercourse with the corpses.
So Ridgway later explained that he did not find necrophilia more sexually satisfying, but having sex with the deceased did reduce his need to obtain a living victim, and thus limited his exposure to being caught. Most of the bodies were not discovered until only skeletons remained. 2 of his victims are still unidentified. The man was stupid. I will let you know that. He contaminated dump sites with gum, cigarettes, and written material belonging to others, and he even transported a few victims across state lines into Oregon to confuse the police. So that's really what he was doing. He was just murdering women at mass. But we are going to go over the victims and how they were found. And kind of what each of their stories is. And like I said, it's a lot, so buckle up.
Okay.
You find her?
I've got kind of a timeline of everything that happened, and I'll just scroll through.
Okay, perfect. Go for it, babe.
So, July 15th, 1982, the body of Ridgway's first victim is discovered. In July 1982, children found the strangled body of Wendy Caulfield, 16, floating in Seattle's Green River. Over the following weeks, 4 more bodies were discovered in or along its banks. All women, all strangled. Does this not go? I don't think this goes into.
I can pull up the police report. So we're going over victims, right?
Yeah.
Is there interviews? Trying to find the page that's all about the victims. Cordelia. Disposal of the bodies. Let's see. I know I found something on that.
Okay, I found a list with small descriptions of each one's. Okay, so his first victim was Wendy Lee Caulfield, age 16. Left her Tacoma foster home July 8th, 1982, and was not seen alive again. 2 boys found her body 7 days later in the Green River.
Go to biography.com because that's where I'm seeing this. And it gives a little bit more of a description of that. In July 1982, children found the strangled body of Wendy Caulfield, 16, floating in the Seattle Green River. Over the following weeks, 4 more bodies were discovered in and along its banks, all women, all strangled. On August 15th, 3 more bodies were found, and Detective David Richards was one of the first authorities to arrive at the scene. Marcy Chapman, 31, was found in the shallow water alongside the naked body of 17-year-old Cynthia Hines. And nearby in the undergrowth lay the body of Opal Mills, 16, blue trousers knotted around her neck, breasts exposed, bruises apparent in her arms and legs.
Well, we definitely got some firewood.
Guys.
We said to grab some.
Why can't we find anything on the victims? It's such bullshit.
So the last one you said was Opal, right?
Yeah, Opal Mills.
Then we have Denise Bush, 23, went to get cigarettes and disappeared from Pacific Highway South on October 8th, 1982. Her remains were discovered on June 12th, 1985 in a wooded area of Tigard Ore.
In February 1990, additional remains were found near Pacific Highway South in Tukwila. The next victim is Terry R. Milligan, 16, vanished from Pacific Highway South on August 29, 1982. Investigators found her remains April 1st, 1984, near Star Lake Road. Then you have Mary Meehan, 19 and 7 months pregnant, was last seen on the SeaTac Strip September 15th, 1982. Detectives found her partially buried remains in the area of South 192nd Street and 27th Avenue on November 13th, 1983. Deborah Lorraine Estes, a 15-year-old runaway, disappeared on September 20th, 1982 while on Pacific Highway South. Workers found her remains while digging holes for a playground at a Federal Way apartment complex May 30th, 1988. So these bodies are being found out of order. Some are not found for years.
I actually had to make a list of like the chronological order.
Yeah.
Wendy Lee Caulfield is the first one. She was 16. She disappeared on July 8th, 1982. She was found July 15th of 1982. Then you have Giselle Ann Lorvie, who was 17, disappeared July 17th, 1982, found September 25th, 1982. Yeah, like, and he's taking these women days apart. So when he claims that the necrophilia helped him have a more cooling down period and not have to take someone, clearly it wasn't helping because these are like days apart.
Yeah. After Deborah, Shonda Lee Summer, 17, disappeared the first week of October 1982. So September, that was a couple weeks after Deborah. Her remains were found August 11th, 1983 at the base of an apple tree north of SeaTac Airport. So he's leaving these people and these women in very specific places in order to revisit them.
Yes, that was actually a point. And after the first 5 victims were found, the task force was formed. And 2 of those detectives, let me see if I can find their actual names. So in the early 1980s, after the first 5 bodies were found, the King County Sheriff's Office formed the Green River Task Force to investigate the murders. The task force members, Robert Capel and David Richards, who would periodically interview incarcerated serial killer Ted Bundy in 1984. Bundy offered his opinions on the psychology, motivation, and behavior of the killer. He suggested that the killer was revisiting the dump sites to have sex with his victims, which turned out to be true, and police found a fresh grave. He told them that they should stake it out and wait for him to come back. And so literally, like, Ted Bundy caught this man.
Yep. And Death Hippie said, imagine how many were not found. Oh, exactly, because he was convicted of 73.
No, he was convicted and sentenced for 48 plus 1. So it's 49 victims total, 49 life sentences. He confessed to 71 and sometimes up to 90 plus victims.
Yeah, they think there is upwards of 91 victims. So that there is a lot who have not been found. Their families did not get justice. He did not get charged for them.
No. But in his plea bargain, which we'll get into those details later, as they discover more bodies, even to current day, because this man is still alive, he is supposed to legally admit if it was his or not.
Yes.
In order to escape the death penalty sentence.
So after Shonda, again in October, Shirley Sherrill, a curly-haired 18-year-old, was last seen in Seattle's Chinatown in late October 1982. Officers found her remains on June 14th of 1985 in Tigard Ore. Then you have Colleen Brockman, a 15-year-old girl with braces, was last seen in Seattle on Christmas Eve, 1982. So he had a cooling off period at points. This jumped from October to December. Her remains were discovered May 26, 1984, near Jovita Boulevard in unincorporated North Pierce County.
So, as for chronological order, it did go from October to December. So he had slight cooling off periods, but a lot of these, the majority of these were done in 1982 and 1983.
Yes. So after Colleen Brockman on Christmas Eve, no one else disappeared again until March 3rd of 1983. Sorry. I meant to say 1982 for the December.
Mm-hmm.
Alma Ann Smith, a blonde 18-year-old Lynchwood woman, disappeared from Pacific Highway South on March 3rd, 1983. Her remains were found April 2nd, 1984, in the woods along Star Lake Road.
Who are we up to?
Alma Ann Smith. That's what I just read.
Okay.
How many are you guys doing?
All of them.
All.
All 49 confirmed victims we are reading off because it is important to give these women their actual names.
Yep.
So continue, babe. I think I found a good list.
Dolores Laverne Williams, 17, of Seattle, disappeared from outside a hotel along Pacific Highway South in March 1983. Her remains were found March 31st, 1984, near Star Lake Road.
Yeah, so the list I found has them divided between where they were found. All this says is that she was last seen in March of 1983 at a bus stop outside the Red Lion Inn on Pacific Highway South.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Gail Lynn Matthews, 23, was last seen sitting in a pickup truck on Pacific Highway South on April 10th of 1983. Two people looking for a lost animal discovered her skeletal remains September 19th, 1983, at the base of a fir tree near Star Lake Road in Auburn. Marie Malvar, 18, of Des Moines, was last seen April 30th, 1983, as she got into a pickup truck on Pacific Highway South. Ridgeway led searchers to her remains in September of 2003. So this is one of the victims that were not found
until he confessed.
For a really, it was 2 decades almost. Andrea Childers, 19, disappeared from a Seattle bus stop April 14th, 1983. Her remains were found in 1989 near SeaTac Airport. Sandra K. Gabbert, 17, was last seen on Pacific Highway Strip April 17th, 1983. Her remains were found April 1st, 1984, in the woods below Star Lake Road.
Oh, shit. So I pulled up his confession, and it discusses each count of these women and what he recalls happened.
Okay.
Do we want his side of this?
Yeah, why don't we, you want to finish reading them off and then read off his...
Sure, we can do that, because I have them.
Then you have Kimmy Kai Pitzer, 16, vanished in April 1983 after she got into a pickup truck in Seattle. Officers recovered her skull near the Mountain View Cemetery in Auburn in December 1983. In December 1985, investigators located Pitzer's remains about 100 yards away at the base of the steep embankment. So there's already a shift, because up until that point, their bodies were intact. All of them were intact.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first one where her remains were not intact, and it would be interesting to know what about that one was so different. The only thing I could think is we could compare her picture to his mother, because psychologically speaking, he was very sexually obsessed with his mother. The anger.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, family, friends, describing it as like almost in an abuse way without saying abuse.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it just kind of, it might be that.
Cheryl Lee Wims, 18, disappeared from central Seattle on May 23rd, 1983. She was killed on her 18th birthday. Oh, that's messed up. Yeah. Investigators found her remains March 22nd, 1984, in an area north of the SeaTac airport and in the vicinity of 2 other Green River victims. Carol Ann Christensen, 21, was last seen May 3rd, 1983, as she left a SeaTac tavern where she worked. Her body was found 5 days later in a wooded area of Maple Valley. Martina Arthur Lee, 18, of the Tacoma area, disappeared from Pacific Highway South on May 22nd, 1983. Her remains were found November 14th, 1984, in the woods off of Highway 410 east of Unumclaw. Yvonne Shelley and Tosh, 19, vanished from Pacific Highway South on May 31st, 1983. Hunters found her skeletal remains October 15th, 1983, near the Big Sioux Creek in Auburn. Carrie Ann Roy, a 15-year-old who dropped out of high school, disappeared in May or June of 1983. Officers found her remains March 10th, 1985, down a hill off of Star Lake Road. Constance Naon, 20, disappeared June 8th, 1983. Her remains were discovered October 27th, 1983, in a vacant lot at 25th Avenue South and South 192nd Street, an area south of SeaTac Airport. Kelly Marie Ware, 22, of Bothell, was last heard from July 18th, 1983. Her remains were discovered October 29th, 1983, about 100 feet from the remains of Constance Now. Tina Marie Thompson, 22, disappeared July 25th, 1983. Investigators found her remains, which had been concealed, April 20th, 1984, near the intersection of Highway 18 and Interstate 90. April Buttram, 17, disappeared in August 1983. Ridgeway led Green River investigators to her remains in Snoqualmie in August of 2003. Debbie Mae Abernathy, a 26-year-old mother, disappeared September 5th, 1983, while wearing a maroon Gucci jumpsuit and large-frame tortoiseshell eyeglasses. An elk hunter discovered her remains March 31st, 1984, near a logging road east of Unumclaw. Tracy Winston, 19, disappeared September 12th, 1983. Her remains were found in March 1986 near some trees at Cottonwood Grove Park next to the Green River in Kent. Maureen Feeney, a 19-year-old former daycare worker, disappeared from Seattle on September 28, 1983. Her remains were found in May 1986 near the intersection of Highway 18 and Interstate 90. Mary Sue Bello, 25, disappeared from Seattle on October 11, 1983. A mushroom hunter found her remains October 12, 1984, on Highway 410 east of Unumclaw. Kim Lee Nelson, a 21-year-old with short bleach blonde hair, was last seen sitting at a bus stop on Pacific Highway South in the morning hours of November 1st, 1983. A Weyerhaeuser employee discovered her remains June 13th, 1986, just off of Interstate 90 at exit 38. That's I'm just gonna pause this real quick because that is insane. Just how public these bodies were, but how long it took to find them.
Jane Doe B10's remains were found in March 1984 in a brushy area at South 146th Street and 16th Avenue South. The remains are still unidentified. A forensic anthropologist described the woman as white, about 15 years old, 5 feet 2 inches to 5 feet 7 inches tall. Patricia Barzak, 19, was last spotted walking along Pacific Highway South near the airport on October 17, 1986. A road maintenance worker found her skull in February of 1993 off Highway 18 in Auburn. She was not originally listed as a victim of the Green River Killer.
No, but was later confirmed due to his plea bargain that yes, in fact, that is one of his.
Yep. Jane Doe B20's remains were found after Ridgway pointed out the spot off Kent Des Moines Road in August. The remains are unidentified. DNA tests conducted on the bones did not turn up a match. Pammy Annette Event, a 16-year-old Seattle girl, left her mother's home October 26, 1983, and was never seen again. Ridgway led the Green River Task Force for remains near Enumclaw in August of 2003. Delise Plager, 22, disappeared October 30th, 1983. A person gathering moss at exit 38 of Interstate 90 found her remains February 14th, 1984. Cindy A. Smith, 17, was last seen in March 1984. 2 youths discovered her remains in an Auburn ravine in June 1987. Lisa Yates, 19, disappeared in December 1983. A soldier, I'm assuming it meant soldier. Soldier found her skeletal remains March 13, 1984 off Interstate 90 in North Bend. Mary West, 16, left her aunt's home February 6, 1984 and disappeared from South Seattle. Her remains were found in a wooded area off Seward Park in Seattle September 8, 1985. Jane Doe B16, whose remains were found December 30th, 1985 in a wooded ravine across from the Mountain View Cemetery. The remains are unidentified to this day. She's described as African American, 20 to 25 years old, and between 5 foot 1 inches and 5 foot 4 inches tall. Roberta J. Hayes, 21, was last seen leaving a Portland jail in February 1987. Her skeletal remains were found September 11, 1991, north of Highway 410. She was again not originally listed as a victim of the Green River Killer. Jane Doe B17, whose remains were found in January 2nd, 1986 in a wooded ravine across from the Mountain View Cemetery about 100 feet away from Jane Doe B16, uncovered days earlier. The remains are still unidentified. She is described as white, 14 to 17 years old, and 5 foot 4 to 5 foot 8. Patricia Yellowrobe, 38, died in August 1998. Her body was found... died in August 1998. Her body was found August 1998 in a vacant lot in the 9400 block of Des Moines Way South. Investigators originally ruled her death accidental, and she was never listed as a victim of the Green River Killer. Linda Rule, 16, was last seen alive September 6, 1982, when she was headed for Kmart in North Seattle. Construction workers found her remains January 31st, 1983, in a shallow ditch near Northwest Hospital in Seattle. Her murder was not included on the official list of Green River victims. And Marta Reeves, a 36-year-old mother of 4, called her estranged husband for money in March of 1990, then was never heard from again. Her remains were found September 20th along Highway 410 near Enumclaw. She was another victim, not originally listed as one of his. And she was not claimed, one of the ones that were not claimed by Ridgway.
Yes. Who is that?
Marta Reeves.
Because
I also have a list of more victims that were not.
Yeah, I have the task force list that has 6 victims left from their list that was not attributed to the actual conviction. That would be Amina Agisha. I'm probably butchering her name, and I apologize. She was 35. She disappeared July 7th, 1982, and her body was found April 18th, 1984. Ridgway denied killing her, and she does not fit the profile of any of the victims of the Green River Killer, considering her age, and she was not a sex worker or a teenage runaway, so she has kind of been dismissed. And then you have Casey Ann Lee, who was 16, August 28th, 1982. Her body is undiscovered. Although he has never been charged with her murder, during police interrogations in 2003, Ridgway did confess to killing Casey Ann Lee. He stated he strangled her in 1982 and left her body near a drive-in theater off of SeaTac Strip. Law enforcement officials have been unable to locate Lee's remains at the dump site that Ridgway indicated.
He was also able to... This is interesting to the fact that he states that he doesn't remember his victims, because he was also just able to state what she was last wearing, which was a camel hair coat, jeans, and beige spiked heels. You also have Tammy Charlene Lyles, 16, was last seen working as a prostitute in downtown Seattle in June 1983. Her skeletal remains were found April 23rd, 1985 in a greenbelt area of Tutalin, Ore.
To speak to that, because it does have a little more explanation, Ridgway is suspected in the deaths of both Angelina Marie Grinder and Tammy Lyles. Their bodies were discovered within a mile of the bodies of known victims Shirley Sherrill and Denise Bush. Lyles remained unidentified until 1998 and Grinder until October 2009.
There was another unidentified woman whose remains were found April 22nd, 1985 in Tutalin, Ore as well.
Her name is Angela Marie Grinders. That's the one.
That was Angela?
Yeah.
And there was Kelly McGinnis, 18, disappeared June 28th, 1983 after she checked into a motel on Pacific Highway South.
Evidence exists to suggest that Ridgway murdered Kelly K. McGinnis. Shortly before her disappearance, McGinnis was questioned by a Port of Seattle police officer while dating, quote-unquote, dating Ridgway near the SeaTac Strip. Furthermore, during the summer of 2003, Ridgway led authorities to bodies of several of his victims. One of those bodies, later identified as that of April Buttram, was initially identified by Ridgway as being that of McGinnis. According to Ridgway, he often confused McGinnis and with Buttram because of their similar physiques.
There's Patricia Osborne, 19, left a hotel on Aurora Avenue North in Seattle on October 1983, then vanished.
Okay, this doesn't have anything more on her other than that she's still undiscovered.
That's all I have for victims, but this does talk about a woman who got away. You want to talk about that?
Actually, I think I have an article pulled up on that. Where is it? Did anyone survive the Green River Killer? It is a article by Kate Sullivan from A&E. I always wondered what it would be like to kill someone. This is what 16-year-old Gary Ridgway reportedly said when walking away from his first victim, 6-year-old who he stabbed in the woods. But Ridgway had only hit his target's liver. The kindergartner survived his encounter with Ridgway, who would go on to become one of America's most prolific serial killers. The Green River Killer name... I'm trying to find if there is a woman that talks about it. Do you have her name?
I do not have her name, but I have the article.
Okay, what's the article?
Well, it's a little snippet.
Okay.
Of all the women Gary Ridgway attempted to murder, only one is known to have escaped. Oh, yeah, it does have her name. On November 9th, 1982, Ridgway met a prostitute by the name of Rebecca Gardway.
Oh, I found it!
And arranged a date. Both parties later described the incident to investigators. Ridgway agreed to pay $20 for sex with Gway. The two drove to an area near South 204th Street where Ridgway wanted to go in the woods. Gway said Ridgway tried to choke her, but she managed to escape and run to a nearby trailer. Ridgway admitted to choking Gway, but said she had bitten him. Gway said that she was certain Ridgway meant to kill her. Quote, his face looked white, clammy, and cold, she told police. His hands, he was a totally different person.
She also did go to police, and because he claimed self-defense because he quote-unquote bit her, he got off for it. So this describes it in a little different detail. On a rainy night in November 1982, Rebecca Grade, a 20-year-old Seattleite, decided to hitchhike home after finishing a shift as a telemarketer. She was picked up by Ridgway, who offered her $20 in exchange for a sex act. After looking at his work ID, she agreed and then drove to a trailer park where Ridgway suggested they go into the nearby woods. There he attacked her. He tried to cover her nose and mouth and then choke her. Guard fought hard, pushing Ridgway into a tree, screaming, "No, it's not. This is not my time. I want to grow up. I want to get married. I want to have babies." She said of her thoughts that night in a 2010 interview with CNN, "I was like, this guy is not going to kill me." After pushing Ridgway away, Grade ran to a nearby trailer, pounded on the door and was let inside. Grade didn't go to the police right away because she was worried that she'd get in trouble for her past sex work and drug use and that the police wouldn't believe her account. She did come forward in 1984. "I had finally gotten the courage to talk to the police, so one day out of the blue, I gave them a call," she told A&E in the series Invisible Monsters. And because she had seen his work ID, she knew the name of the trucking company where Ridgway worked. She then identified Ridgway in a photo lineup, later telling A&E that she vividly remembered his face, especially his eyes. And Killer admitted to knowing Grade, saying that he hired her for sex and that he had strangled her only after she bit him. Grade dropped the charges, but after her report, Ridgway was on the police's radar as potentially more than a John. After Ridgway tried to solicit an undercover police officer in 1984, he became a suspect in the Green River killings. He passed a polygraph then and again in 1986, but remained a person of interest. He has been, though, now linked through DNA, so they know for a fact this is him. Mm-hmm. On November 30th, 2001, Ridgway was at the Kentworth trucking factory where he worked as a spray painter when the police arrived to arrest him. Ridgway was arrested on suspicion of murdering 4 women nearly 20 years earlier after first being identified as a potential suspect. When DNA evidence conclusively linked semen left in the victims to the saliva taken by police, the 4 victims that he was linked to was Marcia Chapman, Opa Mills, Cynthia Hines, and Carol Ann Christensen. 3 more were added to the indictment, which was Wendy Caulfield, Deborah Boner, and Deborah Est. Forensic scientists identified microscopic spray paint spheres as a specific brand and composition of paint used at the Kentworth factory during a specific time frame when these victims were killed. So this goes into the plea bargain that he took, and then I will read his confession, because his confession is a fucking trip, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah, I was reading part of it, like, while you were reading the victims list, and my mind just went, nope, we're reading this out loud. So, November 5th of 2003, Ridgway entered a guilty plea of 48 charges of aggravated first-degree murder as a part of a plea bargain agreed to in June that would spare him from execution in
exchange for his cooperation in locating the remains of 2 women near Portland to confuse police. Deputy Prosecutor Jeffrey Baird, says that the deal contained the names of 41 victims who would not be subject to State versus Ridgeway if it were not for the plea agreement. The prosecuting attorney, Norman Magell, is quoted as saying, "We could have gone forward with 7 accounts, but that is all we could ever have hoped to solve. At the end of the trial, whatever the outcome, there would have been lingering doubts about the rest of these crimes. This agreement was the avenue to the truth. And in the end, the search for truth is still why we have a criminal justice system. Gary Ridgeway does not deserve our mercy. He does not deserve to live. The mercy provided by today's resolution is directed at Ridgeway, but towards the families who have suffered so much." On December 18th, 2003, Judge Richard Jones sentenced Ridgeway to 48 life sentences with no possibility of parole and 1 life sentence to be served consecutively. He was also sentenced to an additional 10 years for tampering with evidence for each of the 48 victims, adding 480 years to his 48 life sentences. So this is his actual confession because it is public record. If you want to find it, literally just look up the Green River Killer's confession. So according to Ridgeway, and in his own words, "I have reviewed information and discovery about each of the murders with my attorneys, and I am positive that I killed each one of the women charged in the second amended information. I killed them all in King County. I killed most of them in my house near Military Road, and I killed a lot of them in my truck not far from where I picked them up. I killed some of them outside. I remember leaving each woman's body in a place where she was found. I have discovered with my attorneys the, in quotations, common scheme or plan, aggravating circumstances charged in all these murders. I agree that each of these murders I committed was a part of a common scheme or plan. The plan was, I wanted to kill as many women I thought were prostitutes as I possibly could. I picked prostitutes as my victims because I hate most prostitutes and I did not want to pay them for sex. I also picked up prostitutes as victims because they were easy to pick up without being noticed. I knew they would not be reported missing right away and might never be reported missing. I picked up prostitutes because I thought I could kill as many of them as I wanted without getting caught. Another part of my plan was where I put bodies of these women. Most of the time I took the women's jewelry and their clothes to get rid of any evidence to make them harder to identify. I placed most of the bodies in groups which I called clusters. I did this because I wanted to keep track of the women I killed. I like to drive by the clusters around the county and think about the murders, or the women I placed there. I usually used a landmark to remember a cluster and the women I placed there. Sometimes I killed and dumped a woman, intending to start a new cluster, and never returned because I thought I might get caught putting more women there. My statements as to each count are as follows. Count 1. In King County, Washington, sometime between July 8th, 1982 through July 15th, 1982, with premeditated intent to cause her death, I strangled Wendy Lee Caulfield to death. I picked her up, planning to kill her. After killing her, I placed her body in Green River. His words. Very, very, and that's how a lot of these are, look, it's very flat state, this is what I did.
No remorse.
None.
No feeling towards these women, but definite feeling towards the act that he committed.
And the feeling is pride. He seems to be proud of what he's doing. Count 2. In King County, Washington, sometime between July 25th, 1982 through August 12th, 1982, with premeditated intent to cause her death, I strangled Deborah Boner to death. I picked her up, planning to kill her, and after killing her, I placed her body in Green River. in King County, Washington, sometime between August 1st, 1982 through August 15th, 1982, with premeditated intent to cause her death. I strangled Marcy Chapman to death. I picked her up, planning to kill her. After killing her, I placed her body in Green River.
So this...
and it goes on like
on
that.
On and on.
Mm-hmm. The first one to differ from that format... in King County, Washington, sometime between September 20th, 1982 through May 30th, 1988. Really? Okay, anyway. With premeditated intent to cause her death, I strangled Deborah Estes to death. I picked her up planning to kill her. After killing her, I buried her body near the Fox Run Apartments in Federal Way.
Yeah, which tracks because... they were the area where she was buried. They dug her up intending, and this is the terrifyingly horrible part about it, they were intending to put a children's playground and found her body instead.
Yeah, so pretty standard, him continuously saying, this is what I intended to do. I picked her up, I planned to kill her, and then after I killed her, I left her here. Oh, count 20 is a little different. In King County, Washington, on or about October 8th, 1982, with premeditated intent to cause her death, I strangled Denise D. Bush to death. I picked her up planning to kill her. After killing her, I left her body just off a dirt road in the neighborhood of Riverton. I later transported some of her remains to a place just off of Bull Mountain Run near Tigard, Oregon. I left the remains there with the remains of Shirley Sherrill. I did this in order to throw off police investigators so that I could continue killing prostitutes.
Oh.
Count 21. In King County, Washington, sometime between October 20th, 1982 through April 9th, 1984, with premeditated intent to cause her death, I strangled Shirley M. Sherrill to death. I picked her up and planning to kill her. After killing her, I left her body off of Auburn Black Diamond Road. Later, I transported her remains to a place just off of Bull Mountain Run near Tigard, Oregon. I left her remains there with the remains of Denise Bush. I did this in order to throw off police investigators that I could continue killing prostitutes. He just kept killing. Like, it's all 49 accounts. What in the hell is all of, like, it's just the same devolved, this is what I did, and I don't care. No remorse. None whatsoever. Gary Ridgway is still alive, for the record. Gary Ridgway currently resides in Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, Washington. And that's just where he's at. Like, continuously admitting to victims or helping police, what have you.
Because he knows the second that he stops cooperating with his plea deal, it goes null and void, and he will get the death penalty.
So I do want to bring this up, because this is a kind of a summary of what came out from his third wife, Judith Mawson. He married her in 1988. Started dating her in 1985. So during that time span, we can see that he devolved into killing less people because we have less confirmed victims throughout that time. Masha claimed in a 2010 interview that when she first moved into his home, that there was no carpet. She was later told by police that he had likely wrapped a body in said carpet. She also described that he would leave early for work in the morning some days, seemingly for the overtime pay. She had speculated that she believes that he may have killed some of his victims during these times. She also claimed that she did not suspect Ridgway's crimes before she was contacted by authorities in 1987 and had not heard of the killings before then because she didn't watch the news. So you're oblivious to everything?
Most likely.
What the fuck? Author Penny Moorhead interviewed Ridgway in prison. And Ridgway said that while he was in the relationship with Mawson, his kill rate went down and that he truly loved her. Mawson told a local reporter, "I feel I have saved lives by being his wife and making him happy." So, yeah.
I mean, that is a really messed up way to look at it, but based on how he spoke, his victimology, she wasn't wrong.
No, she wasn't. It just feels icky to me. You know, just...
Yeah.
Yep. No. But that's the Ridgway killer, guys. So many dead bodies.
One of the biggest, misconceptions, I think, that are out there about Gary Ridgway is that, a lot of people have come up with this theory that he did it because he was religious, which is not the case. He simply saw things in these women that he hated.
Because of his issues with his mom. That's what it really stems down to.
It boils down to a very sick obsession with his mother, and it led to the deaths of a lot of women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot. It is interesting to see that he was claimed to be as religious as he was and still do his acts, but it was definitely not the religion that.
No.
He was going to kill women either way. But I don't know. It's a very dark part of history. And honestly, I find it kind of sad that people don't know about it.
Right.
Because there's so many victims now.
So many more that may never be identified because he's already 73 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these victims may not be identified ever.
And their families will never know. And these women will never get justice.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I like doing these serial killer podcasts and like learning about serial killers, is because not only is the psychology of what is happening interesting to me, but then you also get to understand the people we lost.
Right.
Due to this.
And the people around them. Because you have, a lot of people always have questions of how did these people not see this coming? And, in the case of Gary Ridgway, the child that he had described him as a soccer dad. Like you said.
Yeah.
It's
very similar to, John Wayne Gacy and his kids and wife.
Yeah.
Not really knowing. Obviously there's something weird about dad. The wife knew that about the sodomy thing and all that. But at the end of the day, these killers can blend in. The BTK killer, his daughter talks about all the time how her dad was just so sweet, so pleasant, so attentive, but then was doing these horrific things that when he wasn't home.
Yeah. To
women her age, to women her mom's age. Just because, why? Because he wanted to?
Mm-hmm.
So we can't, defame the people who are family members to these killers.
Right.
You can't just say, oh, well, how did you not know? Because these people know how to blend in.
They know how to hide.
They're sociopaths. They're psychopaths. They mimic other human behavior. So you can blend in.
Literally, like, you don't feel the emotion, but you see other people feel the emotion, and you mimic the facial expressions. You mimic the action.
Yeah.
And it gives off the appearance that that's what you're feeling. That's what's happening. And plenty of serial killers have kids, have wives. Like, without even trying. And I don't get it. I do and I don't. But I don't know. Is there anything else you want to talk about with him?
Not really. He's just a really good example of how anyone around you is capable of something like this.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that we're still finding victims today and, like, looking into the minds of serial killers, it's very hard to even begin to understand why they would want to do something like this. And the sorrow for the families of these victims is just, there's so much.
Yeah. I don't know, it makes me sad for the families. It makes me sad for the women who don't. There's 2 Jane Does that we know about.
There's 4. There are 4 still to this day unidentified.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many more that haven't been found.
That have been claimed, that he claimed to have done, and they've looked for. And at this point, given the decades, they could be buried. The bones could have been dragged off by animals. So many shits could have happened that we'll never find them. And that's honestly not only terrifying, but really fucking sad. And I'm just happy the fucker is in jail for the rest of his life with no possibility of parole. So, but that's our episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed Gary Ridgway and this disgusting piece of shit.
If you have any ones that you would like to see coming up, make sure that you leave a comment. Definitely because that'll get it out there more.
Yes, and you can actually, we do this live on TikTok, but we do post the recordings up onto YouTube. So if you want to go find us, it's the Goddesses of Death account. And we, like, if anyone personally in here who's a friend of ours still needs the link, let me know and I will send it to you. We do have a couple ideas of more serial killers that we want to touch on, because this is something, like, both me and Em have, like, I don't know, how would you describe it, babe?
I've always been into psychology and stuff like that, and I have a personal like for understanding just how dark the mind can go.
I think, well, part of it for me is that I've always been into, like, horror movies and the macabre, the dark shit. And then I grew up with a mother who watched nothing but true crime and serial killers and I just find the psychology fascinating. That's why I took Psych 101 when I went to college. Because that shit just is interesting.
Right. And eventually this will evolve into disappearances, mass murders, stuff like that. So we're not just going to stick to serial killers. So if you even find, like, hey, this cold case, definitely give it a shout out and we'll cover it. Because this stuff needs to be talked about more.
We even have discussed in future podcasts possibly talking about not only John Benet Ramsey, but the young actress who played the voice of Ducky, and just covering her murder. Because it's not a serial killer, but it's a really sad event that especially affects millennials and slightly older, because that's a hardcore childhood 80s film that means something. Possibly going into discussing, like, deaths on movie sets, because there's been plenty, like Brandon Lee.
Right.
Like,
there's like the O.J. Simpson thing going into cults. So this is going to evolve over time, and we're hoping to get a better studio eventually. But we do really appreciate our followers now who are letting us get all the kinks out.
Yep. And for any future followers, stuff like that, these are real people. These are real events. We do not ever take these lightly.
We will also make it very clear to everyone here that there are many serial killers with children. We will never disclose the name of the child. We will let you know that they had a child if it is relevant, but we do not disclose the name.
Correct.
And that is out of protection for them. Obviously, some of the stuff is public information. You can find it yourself, but we aren't going to be the individuals who push that because I don't want anyone getting harassment. And you know how crazy fans get, like, anytime. Mm-hmm. So it's not something that we support. But, so, thanks, guys. We hope you have a good night. This will be posted either tomorrow or the next day on our YouTube channel. Again, if you guys want the actual link to the channel, let me know. I will personally message you, or my girlfriend Em will message you. And yeah, hopefully this gets a lot bigger. I think it will. I like it. We're on episode 3. Cheers. Progress.
All right.
Night, guys.